Emma sat by the window, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug, watching the rain slide slowly down the glass. The afternoon was quiet, almost too quiet, and the hum of the city outside felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. She liked the calm, the slow rhythm of the world outside while she stayed inside, alone with her thoughts. Lately, that quiet had become a constant companion, filling her apartment with echoes of memories she wasn't ready to face. She told herself it was fine that she needed this time, this pause, but there was a heaviness she couldn't shake. She took a sip of her coffee, the bitter warmth grounding her. The apartment was small but cozy, with stacks of books on the shelves and a few scattered photos of places she had visited and friends she had loved. Each item had a story, a memory, and sometimes they reminded her of what she had lost. She had been alone for months after the breakup that had left her world quieter, slower, and more fragile. She had expected to feel sadness, but the real shock had been the emptiness. The strange, hollow space in her routine where someone else used to be. Every morning she woke up and faced that quiet apartment, telling herself that one day it would feel normal again, that the silence would no longer sting. She leaned back in her chair, glancing at her phone, expecting a message, a call, anything to break the monotony. But it stayed silent, her notifications stubbornly empty. She tried to read a book, but the words seemed flat, lifeless. Even her favorite shows couldn't hold her attention. Everything felt distant, as if life itself had slowed down without her noticing. She missed the warmth of laughter, the comfort of shared silence, the tiny moments that seemed meaningless until they were gone. Her heart ached quietly, a soft, persistent reminder that being alone was something she had chosen, but not entirely by her own will. The rain continued to fall, each drop against the window sounding like a tiny drumbeat of time passing. She thought about her plans for the weekend, about calling friends she hadn't spoken to in months, but her energy was low, her motivation dulled by the heaviness of her thoughts. She wrapped her hands around the mug, savoring the heat, the smell of coffee filling her senses and grounding her in the present. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, to let the quiet wrap around her like a familiar blanket, until the sudden knock on the door startled her. It wasn't a heavy knock, not urgent or alarming, but it was unexpected, enough to make her heart skip. She froze, mug halfway to her lips, unsure who could be visiting her on such a rainy afternoon. Visitors were rare. She didn't often see anyone outside of work or errands. Her mind raced through possibilities, neighbors, delivery people, someone from the building, but none of them seemed likely. She set the mug down and hesitated, the anticipation building in her chest. When she finally opened the door, she felt her breath catch. Standing there, shaking off the raindrops from his coat, was Michael. Her Michael, the friend she hadn't seen in years, the one who had once made her heart beat faster without even trying. His hair was damp, sticking slightly to his forehead, and his eyes held that familiar warmth that had always drawn her in. She blinked, unsure if it was really him, unsure if this was a dream. "Michael?" she whispered, her voice barely steady. The sound of his name on her lips felt foreign and familiar all at once. He smiled, that same easy, genuine smile that had once been a constant in her life. And it made her heart flutter despite the surprise. "Hey, Emma," he said softly. "I know this is unexpected." His voice carried a gentleness, a calm that made the storm outside seem distant. "I was in the city for work and I couldn't leave without seeing you." She stepped back, letting him in, still trying to process what was happening. The apartment felt smaller with him there, charged with a sudden energy that made the quiet of the afternoon feel heavier, more alive. Rain dripped from his coat onto the doormat, and she quickly grabbed a towel, their hands brushing briefly. That touch, fleeting as it was, sent a ripple through her chest. They moved into the living room. Both slightly awkward at first, the weight of years and unspoken words between them. Emma gestured to the sofa. "Sit. I'll get some towels and dry your coat." Michael nodded, his eyes scanning the apartment with a quiet curiosity, as if seeing her life after all this time. The familiarity of it, the small personal touches she had around her, seemed to soften the distance that had grown between them over the years. She wrapped his coat in a towel, trying to hide her nervousness. Her hands shook slightly, and she cursed herself for the unexpected surge of emotions. How could someone walk back into her life after years and immediately make her feel so much? But there was no denying it, the old familiarity. The comfort of someone who had known her before life became complicated. It was overwhelming. Michael took the towel from her hands with a gentle smile. "You've made this place cozy," he said, his voice calm but carrying a hint of admiration. "It suits you." Emma felt a blush rise, not entirely from the compliment, but from the fact that he was here, standing in her apartment, talking to her like no time had passed at all. For a moment, they just stood there, rain tapping against the window. To people who had once shared a bond, now reconnecting after years apart. The silence was different this time, less lonely, more filled with possibility. Emma realized her heart was no longer just feeling the absence of someone. It was noticing the presence of someone who might still matter, who had returned when she least expected it. And just like that, the quiet afternoon had shifted. What had begun as another ordinary day now held the potential for something new, something unspoken but deeply felt. She couldn't imagine what the rest of the day would bring. But the knot of anticipation in her chest told her that life had just taken a turn she hadn't seen coming. Michael settled onto the sofa, shaking off the last drops of rain, and Emma sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. The room was warm, the rain outside tapping softly against the window. But inside, an energy lingered, delicate and tense, the kind that comes when people who once mattered deeply suddenly meet again. Neither of them spoke for a moment, both unsure how to begin, yet feeling that words, however awkward, were better than silence. "So, it's really been years," Michael said finally, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. He looked around the apartment, his eyes scanning the familiar yet changed surroundings. "You've made this place yours." Emma felt her chest tighten. It was a simple observation, but it carried an unspoken weight. A subtle acknowledgement that he noticed more than just furniture and decorations. He had always been attentive, the kind of person who remembered small details others overlooked. "Okay." And that made her heart stir. "Yeah, it's cozy," she replied, trying to sound casual. "I like it quiet most days. It's peaceful." She paused, realizing how different her life had become. How the quiet that used to comfort her now sometimes felt like a cage. Michael nodded, understanding more in her pause than in her words. He had always known her in ways few people did, and that familiarity was both comforting and dangerous. It made her feel vulnerable in ways she wasn't ready for a while. They talked about ordinary things: work, the weather, mutual friends, small updates from the years they had missed. But underneath the surface, there was a tension neither could ignore, a history of what had been left unsaid. Emma remembered the nights in college when Michael's presence had been a constant in her life. How she had admired him quietly, secretly hoping he felt the same way. And Michael. She wondered what he had thought, what he had felt when he had left, when life had taken them down separate paths. "I can't believe you're really here," she said finally, unable to keep the astonishment from her voice. "I didn't expect. I haven't seen you in so long." Michael smiled. A soft, genuine smile, and leaned back, his gaze meeting hers directly. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But I knew if I was going to be in town, I had to see you. I couldn't leave without it." His words were simple, yet they landed like a weight on her heart. He hadn't just walked in by chance, he had made a choice. And the thought that he had thought about her, even after all this time, made her pulse quicken. She felt a strange mix of emotions: joy, nervousness, longing, and fear. Her mind raced with questions. Why now? What had changed? Was this just a fleeting visit, or something more? Yet the warmth in his eyes, the way he looked at her without hesitation, suggested honesty, a truth she hadn't expected. It was as if he had brought a piece of the past back with him. And in that moment, the years of distance seemed to shrink, replaced by a fragile, tentative connection that demanded attention. As they spoke, Emma noticed the little things she had always loved about Michael, The way his smile softened his whole face. The way he listened, really listened, as if every word mattered. The subtle gestures that revealed his care. And she realized how much she had missed that. Life had gone on without him, yes. But there had always been a quiet corner of her heart reserved for the moments they had shared. For the bond that had never fully faded. Seeing him now, those feelings stirred awake, raw and unpolished, but impossible to ignore. Michael laughed at something small, she said, a light, easy sound that made her forget the tension for a moment. It was like stepping back in time, back to when their conversations had flowed effortlessly, when they could sit for hours without noticing how quickly time passed. But beneath the laughter there was an unspoken question hovering between them. One they hadn't addressed in years. What had they truly felt? What had been left unsaid? Emma's throat tightened as she realized that question had never really left her. And she sensed it hadn't left him either. Finally, Michael's expression shifted, his eyes softening. "Emma, there's something I need to say," he began, his voice quieter now, careful. She leaned forward slightly, heart pounding, sensing the weight in his words. "I left, but I never forgot you. I've thought about you more than you know." His confession hung in the air, heavy and fragile, and Emma felt her breath catch. She hadn't expected him to admit that. Not so soon, not so directly. Her mind swirled with memories of the nights she had spent wondering, imagining what could have been, and now here he was, finally speaking the truth she had secretly longed to hear. Her emotions wavered between hope and caution. "Michael, I never knew," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I thought maybe it was just me, thinking too much." He shook his head gently, reaching out as if to close the space between them, though he didn't yet take her hand. "It wasn't just you," he said, eyes earnest. "I just didn't know how to say it back then. Life got complicated." Emma nodded, understanding more than words could express. Life had indeed separated them, pushed them apart. But it hadn't erased what they felt. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain outside their only background music. Emma felt a strange thrill, a tension that was both exciting and frightening. The quiet that had filled her apartment for months was gone, replaced by something electric, something unspoken but palpable. She realized that this visit wasn't just about catching up, was about the possibility of something unfinished, something waiting to be rediscovered. Michael leaned back, eyes never leaving hers. "I don't want to leave again without saying this," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "You mattered to me then, and you still do. I had to come and tell you." Emma's chest tightened. The honesty in his words cut through the years of uncertainty. And for the first time in a long while, she felt seen, understood, remembered. Her heart ached with a longing she hadn't dared to acknowledge. And yet it was sweet, like rain warming the earth after a long drought. "Michael, she started, unsure what to say. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, emotions she had held back for too long threatening to spill over. She wanted to tell him everything she had felt, everything she had imagined over the years, but the words seemed inadequate, fragile against the intensity of what she was feeling. He reached out slowly, carefully, and their fingers brushed. It was a small gesture, but it sent a shiver through her, a spark of connection that neither time nor distance had diminished. The afternoon stretched on, rain continuing to fall, and yet inside time seemed suspended. Emma realized that the quiet life she had clung to had left her unprepared for moments like this, moments where the past and present collided, where emotions once hidden surfaced with sudden intensity. Michael's presence brought back not only memories, but possibilities. A sense that life could be different, brighter, if she dared to step forward. And as they talked, shared stories, laughed softly, and lingered over silences that felt heavy with meaning, Emma understood something vital. This visit was more than a reunion. It was a chance, fragile and uncertain, to rewrite what had been left unfinished, to confront feelings that had waited years to be voiced. And in that quiet apartment, amidst the soft rhythm of rain and the warmth of a familiar presence, Emma felt the first flicker of hope, the beginning of a story that was far from over. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle, soft against the windows. But inside Emma's apartment, the air felt heavier, charged with emotions neither of them had expected to face. Michael had settled into the sofa, and Emma found herself standing by the counter, nervously stirring her coffee. The earlier warmth of casual conversation had shifted into something deeper, something unspoken that neither could ignore. Each glance, each pause carried weight. They were no longer just old friends catching up, they were two people confronting years of suppressed feelings. Michael's eyes followed her movements, calm yet intense, and she felt a flutter she hadn't experienced in a long time. He had always had that way about him, looking at her like she was the only person in the room, like he could see through everything she tried to hide. Emma set down her mug and finally turned to face him, her heart racing. "Michael, why did you come here? Why now?" she asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers loosely intertwined, and let out a quiet sigh. "Because I needed to see you," he said simply. But the honesty in his voice hit her harder than any elaborate explanation could. "I needed to know if what I felt back then, if it meant anything to you now." The words lingered, unembellished yet heavy with history. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Memories flooding back, the long walks in the park, the shared late-night coffees, the quiet laughter that had once filled their days. She moved closer, sitting on the edge of the sofa, feeling the space between them shrink. "Michael, I never stopped thinking about you," she admitted, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound composed. "Even when I tried to convince myself I had moved on, part of me kept waiting." His eyes softened, and a small, almost shy smile curved his lips. "You have no idea how much that means," he whispered, his voice low, almost reverent. "I've thought about you every day since we parted. Every choice, every move I made, I wondered if I should have stayed, if I could have done things differently, for a moment." They sat in silence, each lost in memories of a past that had shaped them both, a past that had left them vulnerable and longing. The room felt warmer, intimate in a way that was almost startling, as if the years of separation had condensed into this single fragile moment. Emma noticed the subtle changes in him, the faint lines on his face, the way his hands rested lightly on his knees, the calm in his presence that had grown with age yet retained the same gentle charm. "I've always regretted leaving without saying what I truly felt," Michael continued, his eyes meeting hers directly. "I thought I was protecting myself, but really I was protecting my pride. And in the process, I left you wondering, left you with questions I should have answered." Emma's chest tightened. She had carried those questions for years, wondering what he had thought, wondering if she had misread everything. Now, hearing him admit the same doubts and regrets, the weight on her heart began to shift. She reached out, hesitating for a fraction of a second before letting her hand hover near his. "Michael, we were both scared," she said softly. I didn't know how to say what I felt either. I thought maybe it was one-sided, that I was imagining things." His hand moved slightly, brushing against hers, light and tentative, as if testing the waters. That simple touch sent a shiver through her, a spark that reminded her of everything she had missed, the small, everyday moments that had once made her heart race. He leaned back slightly, studying her face with an intensity that made her heart pound. "I wasn't imagining it," he said firmly. "Everything we shared, it meant more to me than I ever admitted. And seeing you now, it's like coming home after being lost for years." Emma swallowed, her emotions a mix of joy, fear, and longing. She wanted to reach out to bridge the distance completely, but the vulnerability of the moment made her hesitate. This was real. This was raw, and it scared her in the best possible way. The conversation drifted into memories of their college days, late-night talks, shared dreams, inside jokes that only they understood. Laughter bubbled up between them, lightening the tension. But it was underscored by a deeper awareness of the feelings that had never been fully explored. Each story, each shared memory felt like a thread weaving them closer together, knitting the years apart into something tangible, something they could hold on to. Michael's voice softened, almost hesitant, as he spoke again. Emma, I don't want to leave without knowing if there's still a chance for us. I don't want to go back to pretending that years don't matter, that feelings don't matter. Her heart raced, a surge of hope mingled with fear. She had imagined this moment countless times, wondered what it would feel like to hear him say these words. And now it was happening, and it felt overwhelming and beautiful all at once. I don't know what the future holds, she admitted, her voice trembling. But I do know that seeing you now, it feels like something I've been waiting for without even realizing it. Michael's hand found hers, holding it gently, reassuringly. Then maybe we can figure it out together, he said, his thumb brushing softly over the back of her hand. Step by step. No rush. Just us. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief, of longing finally acknowledged, of hope quietly blooming after years of waiting. Finally, Michael leaned back, his gaze soft and steady. I know this is sudden, he said, but I needed to be honest with you. I couldn't leave without telling you how I really feel. Emma nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle around her like a comforting blanket. I'm glad you did, she said quietly. It matters more than you know. For the first time in years, they both felt the possibility of something real, something that had waited patiently for the right moment to return. The past was still there, lingering in shadows and memories. But now it wasn't a chain. It was a bridge, connecting them in a way that felt fragile yet unbreakable. Emma realized that life had given them a rare chance to rediscover each other, to explore feelings long buried, and to perhaps start something new. Something that neither had dared to hope for until now. As the day faded into evening, the room dimmed, yet the warmth between them grew. They remained close, hands brushing, glances lingering, the unspoken words filling the space with anticipation and gentle longing. Emma knew this was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could have predicted, a journey that promised hope, emotion, and the quiet thrill of love finally spoken aloud. Evening had settled over the city, soft orange light spilling through the windows. But inside Emma's apartment, the glow was warmer, brighter, alive with the quiet intensity of two hearts reconnecting. The rain had stopped, leaving a clean scent in the air. And yet the room felt heavy with anticipation, filled with emotions neither of them had fully expressed. Emma sat close to Michael on the sofa, the space between them now almost non-existent. Every glance, every small movement carried meaning. Neither wanted to break the fragile moment they had created together. I can't believe this is happening, Emma said softly, almost to herself. Her voice trembled, a mixture of excitement, relief, and a little fear. After all this time, you're here. Michael reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and she felt a shiver run through her. I never stopped thinking about you, he said quietly, his hand lingering near hers, careful but insistent. I needed to tell you. Needed you to know how much you've mattered to me all these years. His words were simple, direct, yet they carried a weight that made her heart swell with emotion. Emma leaned back slightly, catching her breath. She wanted to speak, but words felt inadequate, too fragile to convey the depth of what she felt. Michael's presence had always had a way of cutting through her defenses. Now, after years apart, it was almost overwhelming. She realized how much she had longed for this, how much she had imagined a moment like this, and how fragile and beautiful it felt to have it finally become real. I've waited for this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Even when I told myself I shouldn't, even when I tried to move on, a part of me never let go. Michael's gaze softened, and he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they had done countless times in the past. Yet this time it carried the weight of years of longing, of love unspoken. Then we're both here for a reason, he said. We've had our time apart, our mistakes, our doubts, but maybe that's why this feels right now. Maybe we're ready. The warmth between them grew, quiet but undeniable. Emma's chest tightened with emotion, tears threatening to fall, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally being seen, finally being understood. Michael's presence, his words, the way he looked at her, it all reminded her of the bond they had shared, of the deep connection that had never fully disappeared. She realized that life had given them a rare second chance, one that could not be ignored. They talked quietly, sharing more memories, laughing softly at moments that now felt nostalgic, almost dreamlike. Each story, each recollection brought them closer, weaving the past into the present in a way that was both comforting and exhilarating. Emma noticed how much he had changed, how time had matured him. Yet how his essence remained the same. The Michael she had once loved was still there, steady, kind, and understanding. And in that realization, she felt a spark of hope, a quiet thrill that maybe they could build something new together, stronger than before. "I was scared for so long," she admitted finally, her voice breaking slightly. "Scared that you wouldn't feel the same? That this was all just in my head." Michael leaned closer, brushing his thumb lightly over her knuckles. "I felt the same," he said softly. "I thought you had moved on, that I had missed my chance forever. But being here now, I know we're meant to be honest, to face what we feel, no matter how late it comes." Emma's heart swelled. The fear that had haunted her for years began to melt, replaced by warmth, by the thrill of possibility. They sat together, side by side, letting the silence settle around them, not an empty silence, but one filled with understanding, with shared emotion, with the promise of something new. Each time their hands brushed, each time their eyes met, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the feelings that had never truly faded. It was a slow, gentle connection, building trust, rebuilding what had been lost, and creating a space where they could both breathe freely. "You've no idea how much this means to me," Emma whispered, her head slightly tilted toward him. "Just seeing you, hearing your voice, feeling this." Michael smiled, leaning in just slightly, careful not to rush, letting the moment stretch, savoring it. "I think I've dreamed of this moment more than I realized," he admitted. "All those years, all the distance. It led us here. Maybe it was meant to be this way." The room grew darker as the sun dipped below the horizon, but the light between them never dimmed. Michael gently pulled her hand closer, holding it firmly yet tenderly. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, feeling the joy of finally being reunited with someone who had always held a piece of her heart. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about honesty, presence, and the quiet, profound connection that had endured time and distance. "I don't want to lose this," she said softly, resting her head just slightly toward him, though still maintaining the delicate tension of the moment. "I don't want to let go again." Michael's eyes softened, and he nodded. "Neither do I," he said. "We've had our chances, and we've missed some. But right now, we have each other, and that's what matters. Step by step, day by day, we'll see where this goes." The evening continued, the city outside fading into night, but the apartment remained warm, intimate, a small sanctuary filled with emotion and quiet joy. They talked, laughed, and shared moments of silence that were no longer lonely, but full of understanding and shared presence. Each glance, each subtle touch strengthened the fragile bond, a bond that had survived years of separation, uncertainty, and longing. Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The quiet apartment, once filled with solitude and longing, was now alive with the promise of new beginnings. Michael's presence reminded her of what she had once loved, what she had once feared, and what she could now embrace: a connection that was patient, genuine, and deeply felt. As they finally sat back, hands still entwined, eyes meeting with unspoken understanding, Emma realized something profound. Love doesn't always fade with time. Sometimes it waits, quietly, patiently, for the right moment to return. And in that moment, it can feel stronger, more real, and more beautiful than ever before. The rain had stopped. The evening was quiet, and yet inside Their hearts were full, alive with hope, with emotion, and with the gentle, undeniable certainty that this was the beginning of a story they were finally ready to write together. It wasn't about rushing, about grand gestures, or dramatic revelations. It was about being present, being honest, and letting the bond they had rediscovered grow naturally, tenderly, and with all the care that love deserved. And in the soft glow of the evening, Emma and Michael simply held hands, letting the past dissolve, letting the present matter, and stepping forward together into a future that promised connection, understanding, and the quiet, enduring magic of love finally acknowledged.